Hey, beautiful people. I'm not sure what you're doing, but right now you should definitely be watching us because this is Give It to the People Live. And I have a great guest that is on today, as always. But this is a little bit different because you know that we're doing our She Podcast speaker series. So I'm Chisa Penix Brown, and I am the chief curator over at Give It to the People, which we are a mental wealth company. We focus on helping get your mind right and your money right. And most of the things that we focus on are BIPOC businesses, women-owned businesses, and then organizations that support them. But we're doing this specific series with She Podcast because the She Podcast Live Conference is coming up. And so I get the opportunity to be able to interview some of the amazing speakers that will be there. And so I'll be one of the speakers, but I want to introduce you today to Brenda. She is super awesome and she has such a great background. And I thought she was still out in the West Coast, but we had a little brief conversation before. She is now in Philly. So we have to, are you like excited about the NBA finals since Philly is in there right now, or are you not a basketball girl?
I'm not a sports girl, but if I have to be a sports girl, I could be a basketball girl.
Okay.
So I am open. Please educate me.
Well, if I'm going to pick, my team is actually the Warriors. So I'm taking it right back out to California with that one. And I did used to like Philly when Allen Iverson was playing back in the day, but, it's not so much. So now it's kind of like I've been with the Warriors the last couple of years, and I'm just going to stick to that. And I'm going to be a Cali girl on that end, even though I'm not, but I am.
Okay. Well, since I'm a Cali girl, I'm on the same page as you then.
Okay. Yes, that sounds good. So you have an amazing podcast, and I just want you to just give people a little bit of background on you, and then what even made you start your podcast? Because everybody's journey is totally different that led them into this. What is your story?
Well, my journey begins as an 18-year-old wanting to be a journalist. I was studying university for communications in Mexico, and I always wanted to share people's stories and know about people's stories and what was going on to amplify it to the world.
Yeah.
And moving forward to 2019, I was 25. I was back in California, and I realized that there was little change that I could do as a journalist, as a reporter, and that I had the tools to, instead of going into this media platforms, to create my own space and create my podcast. I had the interview skills, the editing skills, the marketing skills, and I started AYES, and I focused on amplifying Latina voices and stories. I was tired of stereotypical stories on media, on news, on movies, on everywhere that was just like one perspective and one story that wasn't the whole truth. And I just went all for it. And since then, I've amplified more than 70 Latina voices and stories. And we were featured last year as one of the best Spanish and Latino podcasts on Oprah Daily. So that was like just a huge, just milestone from like me having this hunger and desire to amplify our stories and knowing that I was great at it and people would be inspired, but I never realized that Oprah's team would listen to my podcast. So it's just how podcasting has changed my life, my career. It changed me from communications marketing to podcasting, focusing on digital marketing for B2B businesses, B2C businesses. It made me open my own business, AYES Media, where I help other people to grow their podcast. And it has led me now to live the life that I have in Philadelphia, which is just, continue amplifying our voices, continue growing my business, creating a community here, and not having to worry about what my life is going on when I started the podcast. So it's very life-changing. I imagine podcasting has changed yours as well.
Yeah, it has. But I think that, it's interesting because I'm a person who helps people start their businesses. So it's always interesting when a person says, I didn't even start out trying to create it as a business, but then I realized that the skills that I had, then lend themselves to being great, to being a business owner. And so then you take that skill set and then you turn it into something where you're also helping other people to be able to, like you said, to amplify their voices, to be able to grow, to be able to be seen, to be able to be heard. And what was that transition from that? Okay, listen, I don't think I like this journalism thing because maybe it's too much control, or maybe I don't get to tell the stories that I want, to saying this should be a business. Like, what was that light bulb moment or that spark that said, let's do it, let's make it a business?
So I switched from journalism to marketing when I was 23, 24.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, I was just disappointed in how I couldn't share the stories. I was doing it, I would write for other media platforms about the specific stories I wanted, but it didn't feel like I was making a big change to that. And then when it switched to from Ellas as a podcast, a passion project, to a business through
Mm-hmm.
Ellas Media, that was in the summer of 2021
Okay.
when it was, we were locked down and I realized I'm just tired. I'm tired of growing other people's shows, and I have all the skill set. I've taken my own show and other people's shows so far.
Mm-hmm.
I can do this, but I can work with people that I actually like.
Yes.
So let's do it. And by that point, my friends were telling me, hey, you
Mm-hmm.
should do this. You should actually open up your podcasting services. And I
Mm-hmm.
always knew I wanted to do a media company, but I didn't know how it would go
Uh-huh.
until it hits you. You have to live through it and you have to come to that conclusion instead of people telling you to do it. That's when I
Mm-hmm.
realized, and was like, okay, I started AGS Media, and since then I've helped, people from under historically excluded communities, because I think throughout the many years, many communities, the Black community, Latino community, Asian community, has been historically excluded from us freely telling our stories.
Mm-hmm.
So as someone who has experienced that, I can relate and provide them the tools and guide them and also help them to not burn themselves out, to effectively share their stories.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always that reason. And the thing is that you're still a journalist, right? Like, I know you're saying, Luke, I was a journalist and I turned to marketing, but it's still journalism. Like, you're still being able to do it, but now you're just doing it on your terms. So how do you leverage your voice and values to develop the connections that you have with your podcast that help you to increase your value? Because going from I'm thinking about it, I'm starting it, it's a business, to Oprah's team is calling me, like that journey had to be something amazing. So, when you talk about those connections, what were some of those things that you were able to develop in that time frame to be able to get you where you are now?
In order to even to start developing these connections, I always knew who I am. I've always known who I am as a person who has values in, not only is it important for me to amplify my own voice, but it's important to make other people feel safe to share their own voice, to actively listen to them
Mm-hmm.
and see where the story, what walls they're building up to prevent themselves to even share some parts of their stories.
Mm-hmm.
What door are they trying to close, but are maybe is like slightly open to me, so I can go in, ask to be invited, and for them to feel comfortable to me, for them to share my story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from there, I had always, when I started AGS and my business, I knew that I needed to be surrounded by people that have the same values as me. That not only care about the Latino community, but also care and support other historically excluded communities.
Mm-hmm.
And that their work, be it, a prima ballerina, a photographer, a model, a journalist, their work was also not only affecting in a positive way the Latino community, but other communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I, as a journalist, did my research, would, stalk them, read what they were doing, their work, past and everything. And then I said, okay, they fit. They fit what Aegis is about. And I want them. I'm inspired by them. I know my listeners are going to be inspired by them.
Mhm.
And by being an active fan, an admirer of their work, that translated in interviewing them
Mhm.
when they were on the podcast. And from there, they saw just the worth of a yes.
Mhm.
And from there, we were able to grow friendships.
Mhm.
Many of my guests are my friends now, are my business reporters, are advocates for me. They say my name when I'm not in the room.
Yes.
And that's how I lead my life, not just for a yes, but also outside of a yes. And I think when you're building something, not only for yourself, but for your community, that part of you that makes you you should
Mhm.
be part of that DNA when
Mhm.
you're growing either a podcast or a business.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, I mean, that makes perfectly good sense to me because I think, and this is my opinion, a lot of times nowadays, and I'm even thinking about it from a music standpoint, people want to follow the trend, right? And so that trend may not be what is authentically natural to you. And eventually it's going to come off, as false or, just disingenuine. And so when you start to look at what is really great about you, that's the magic that you bring to the podcast world. That's the voice that you have. And so what you do, which I'm sure that there are other people that do this as well, but
Of course.
to me, it is not necessarily difficult because I'm not as bilingual. I really only speak sarcasm in English. I would love to be fluent in Spanish though too, but your podcast is bilingual. So how difficult is it to produce something that is in English, that's in Spanish, and to just host it and make it successful? Because I'll see like some not podcasters necessarily, let's just say influencers. And so what they'll do is they know that they want to reach both demographics. So they'll write their posts where you have an English and then you have the Spanish version, so that this way they reach out to both demographics and they don't want to exclude anybody. And that's different because you're writing it. So everybody's just reading. But when you're actually speaking, you're doing both. Then how difficult is that to produce, a bilingual podcast?
So I will say, Chisa, not everyone can speak sarcasm.
Well, I'm really, really, I'm fluent in it. I've been working on it for a long time. And I'm always just honing my sarcasm skills.
So see, that's the same way that I apply, as a bilingual speaker.
Uh-huh.
And I'm always refining me speaking these both languages, English and Spanish. I
Uh-huh.
grew up speaking Spanish, and then my first educational language with reading, writing was English.
Yeah.
So when I moved to Mexico City, of course, I had to develop that skill for Spanish. When so personally for me, I've
Mhm.
always lived in this world with two languages and surrounded by other languages that I didn't understand, but I was surrounded by them. And
Mhm.
I knew, because I speak these two languages, the importance of how everything needs to be communicated, and not everything that you think means something is correctly the correct definition. So
Mhm.
going through university, going to high school in Mexico and learning the language, able to communicate in Spanish, I was then able to effectively implement that when producing a yes.
Mhm.
The first 10 episodes are in English and they're with my friends. Uh, and I knew that I needed to do that in order to first see if this was interesting for other people. And
Mhm.
I obviously didn't know, the Vogue editor of Vogue fashion stylist,
Yeah.
in the beginning, but I knew my strengths. And then once episode 11 hit, I decided I'm going to do one episode in English and then one episode in Spanish.
Mhm.
Why? Because it's a yes. I
Mhm.
interview Latinas, and not all Latinas speak in English and not all Latinas speak in Spanish.
Mhm.
I am an example of that. And that way I was catering also to different audiences
Mhm.
who use podcasting to learn English or to learn Spanish.
Mhm.
And then from there, I've always go back to, what does the guest feel comfortable with?
Mhm.
Do they feel comfortable speaking in English? Are they able to effectively communicate their message in Spanish?
Mhm.
So it's always caring about the guest first
Mhm.
and then about the listener. Okay?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that's important, because if you make the guest feel uncomfortable, the listener is going to pick up on that. And then from there, writing copy in Spanish or in English, depending on the episode. And from there, it was just consistent, having, every 2 months an interview, and then editing episodes to have a consistent schedule. But it's about consistency. And at that time, my life was just revolved around a yes, which
Mm-hmm.
is just why I was able to reach out to many people and to effectively provide the tools for my listeners to
Mm-hmm.
understand the episodes.
Do you think that having the Spanish episodes, because I'm sure you probably look at your analytics, but do you think that that is kind of like the edge that you have? Because now, even though there are people that are bilingual, but they may feel more comfortable listening in Spanish, right? And so it's kind of like I like to watch a lot of different things on TV. And even if it's English or anything, I still like to see the subtitles. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just kind of like, if I were to speak Spanish fluently, I would want to hear things in the most comfortable way for me, right? And so, do you think that those episodes kind of help to skyrocket what's going on with your podcast? Because maybe now more people are more, even like you said, comfortable listening in Spanish, even though they understand English.
Yes, even when I'm, publishing these episodes in Spanish, I still see, high numbers in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That for me gives me an idea. Okay, people who understand Spanish, who might speak it or are learning it, are in
Mm-hmm.
the United States. But I also have listeners in India, in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
in other countries where you think, well, there might be someone that's a Spanish speaker, or there might be Latino, or they are just interested in knowing this industry or this person, or maybe they're a fan of Aegis and myself, and
Yeah.
that's how they've been able to follow the podcast. So I would say, if you feel uncomfortable, or you don't feel ready to share your voice in English because you feel like you have an accent, I would say go for it and
Mm-hmm.
try both languages. Try English and Spanish, because the power of podcasting is that when you listen to someone that sounds like you or
Mm-hmm.
similarly sounds like you don't feel alone. And the power of having someone talk to your ears
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. It's just really, really makes you feel less alone in this world. And, growing up, people would tell me, "Oh, you have an accent." And
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, "Oh, yeah. Okay. I also have an accent in Spanish. That's cool."
Mm-hmm.
And through podcasting, I was able to find people that connect with me, that connect with my guests. So don't put walls and stop yourself from doing something that can be fun, can, develop new skills, can open doors for you. And it's just, don't let other people, stop you or yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
can podcast in English and Spanish if you have an accent, if you don't have an accent, but at the end of the day, everyone has an accent. So just be
Mm-hmm.
you, like what we've been talking. If you're, bilingual in sarcasm and in French, do it.
Yes, no, I mean, that's one of the things that I think more people are scared, right? Like, so many great things can happen because you asked a question. And if you didn't ask that question, you wouldn't have had the answer, or it would have took you longer to get to it. And so I think a lot of times when we're doing this, and it depends on how people are podcasting, right? Because, my podcast, like with Real Ass Affirmations, I'm really me talking to, in my mind, like another version of myself, which then is the audience, right? But then when I'm doing something like this, we give it to the people, it is more exploring what's going on with you, and really putting a focus on whoever the guest is, because I think that each person has something interesting to be able to offer an audience, and especially in relation to business and how they approach it, right? But if you had, maybe, if I'm going to pick, what famous Latina would you love to interview that you haven't interviewed yet, that you just were like, listen, I want to get inside your head, I really want to see what's going on with you and your story?
Oof. I mean, I've had so
Which
many
one?
amazing Latinas, and
No.
um oh my god. Alive or dead? Because I mean, alive, they're still amazing people. They're still amazing.
You choose whichever one.
Um I guess I would go with, just because I love their work, and it would be Salma Hayek as an actress.
I do love Selma.
Um, and just knowing, because she's been very open about her journey, as she was famous back in Mexico, but learning what she had to go through in
Uh-huh.
Hollywood, and then being able to cultivate relationships that she developed back in Mexico,
Uh-huh.
like with the three amigos,
Uh-huh.
Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, Alejandro González Iñárritu, and then just knowing how she is now a person that is helping other young Latino actors
Uh-huh.
break into this industry. So I would love to learn more about her and get into her head, because there's things that we know about her, but I know as an interviewer, as a podcaster, I can
You can get
take,
in there.
yeah, and get more.
Yeah, and she's been able to sustain for such a long time, you know what I mean? And so when you start to think about, and I think this just happens in Hollywood, right? I mean, I'm sure it's not necessarily just regular life, but Hollywood, it's like they pick one person to represent a whole entire area of whatever this part of the industry is. So if it's a Latina, if it's, this is the Black man that's going right now, but then this may be the British Black, you know what I mean? So it's always one of those things where it's like one, and then they have this sustaining power. So like Michelle Yeoh, right? So she's been the Asian one for all of these years, and then is finally able to be recognized and win awards, right? But all of the years that went into what anybody has done need to be recognized. And I think oftentimes we don't pay attention to it as much, which is why us as podcasters, we get that opportunity to really shine that light on people who we know what their worth is. And, we're just interested in trying to find out more about them. So if you are saying, listen, hey, I am trying to build my podcast, and this is one of the things where I'm always interested in people's just take and perspective on statistics, numbers, metrics, all of that. Listens, downloads, returners, subscribers, all of the rest of that. People get so overwhelmed and they get so into the numbers as far as like how many subscribers there are. And I personally don't, I'm not trying to say that I don't care, because I know you should care from like a sponsorship standpoint. But I just kind of feel like, in a way, if people are getting value, they're sending messages, they're DMing, they're telling you, how this episode affected them, how they learned something, I feel like that's more important, right?
Yes.
But if people are just like, look, I'm overwhelmed, I'm obsessed with how many followers I have, what do you say to that as far as those type of people?
Don't obsess over the numbers. I am with you, Chisa. I believe that a message. A listener who then turned into a guest, who is now a friend, wrote me a handwritten letter when she was just a listener, saying how ellas changed her life.
Wow.
And through listening through these episodes of our guests, of how they, came to a point in their life saying, I don't know, I don't want to live this anymore. I want to open up my business and leave this toxic job. It inspired her to do that. And she
Wow.
now has her business, and she's like, going on speaking engagements. She's doing her own thing.
Yes.
That is more life changing for me. It gives me more like, oh, I impacted one person, but that one person is also impacting more people, And at the end of the day, um, you can't obsess over a million numbers, downloads that one might never have,
Mhm.
because in order to do that, we need to have a team like Oprah or Beyonce or Salma Hayek,
Uh-huh.
because, people, when we're starting out, we do not have a team that can help us get those millions, billions of downloads.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to know why are you starting this podcast? Is it a personal thing like
Yeah.
me? Do you want to amplify stories? Do you see a problem that's there, it's not being solved?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take your business and get sales? Because if it's business, then downloads isn't the number one goal then it's converting your listeners or even guests to become clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to know why you're doing this, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have to just get clear on one goal. What do you want for the first 3 to 6 months, a year of this
Mm-hmm.
podcast? What does success mean? What does it equal? When I started AS, I said one day I would love to be recognized on Oprah Daily.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to happen anytime soon? I know it's going to take years, and it did take years. It took 3 years,
Uh-huh.
but it was 3 years of consistent work
Mm-hmm.
and of not only publishing episodes, but doing digital marketing, having a blog, having my own website, doing newsletters,
Mm-hmm.
open mouth marketing, telling my friends, telling my coworkers. I mean, me talking about my podcast, helped me
Yeah.
have another position at my job
Mm-hmm.
and to make my podcast grow. So it's just, you have to do many things in order to
Mm-hmm.
make people know about your show and to listen to it. Also, to
Mm-hmm.
make those people listen, you have to be good, in the sense your episodes have to be of quality. Are you doing your job? Are you researching your guest? Are you researching your topic?
Mm-hmm.
What do you have that will make people not only listen for the first time but stay,
And keep
right?
coming back and
And
keep
keep
coming
coming
back.
back.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know
So
what? You just like that, just I felt that when you were saying like you may never have it. Like, but is the goal a million episodes? I mean, or a million downloads, And so when you put that energy out in the air and said, I want to be on Oprah Daily, that was the start of it. And then you did the work to get there. So but I felt what you said when you're like, okay, why are you worried about that? You may never get there. Like, I think everybody has this big number, big goal or something in mind, but I always look at, there are a lot of people, because I would love to do it just full time and that's it, right?
yes,
But it's still work that it takes in order to get there. And I think that's really
exactly.
what you're alluding to is you still did all of the things. Like, there was a process. It wasn't just overnight. It took 3 years. But then the question would be, and I mean, just if you can answer this quickly, once you got it, then now did you come up with another goal? Because now you got it. So
Yes.
what's your next goal?
My next goal is now to produce my show in a sustainable way that doesn't burn me out. Because 3 years of doing this consistently, and
Yes.
that was my priority, and I was just focused on that.
Uh-huh.
It really was just that. And now that I've, accomplished this, and now that to be honest, my life has changed.
Mhm.
I'm now in a different city. I have to, not only care about me, but about, my cat, about, my community that's surrounding me. Now I have to see how my podcast fits into my life, my
Uh-huh.
personal life, my business, my, full-time job,
Uh-huh.
but doing it in a way that's healthy for me.
Yes.
Because if I'm not doing that, then how am I going to give the best to my listeners?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my goal for now, doing it in a sustainable way, in a healthy way that doesn't burn me out. What does that mean? Doing it in seasons. So I can be creative while
Mm-hmm.
I'm on pause
Mm-hmm.
and bring new, fresh ideas when I'm producing,
Mm-hmm.
and when I'm publishing and, having these episodes out, I'm giving quality episodes to my listeners. And one thing, going back to the don't focus on numbers. If you focus on numbers, on downloads, on followers,
Mm-hmm.
and if you reach out to people that have billions of followers, and if you have that mindset,
Mm-hmm.
then it's most likely people will say no to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coming with a goal of the why, of a personal why, of like, this is for the better of our community, and you explain that effectively, people who have, maybe 1,000 or more followers will
Mm-hmm.
say yes, because at the end of the day, the message
Mm-hmm.
fits with your values. So if your values is just numbers, the people that only value numbers are going to say no to you, because you're starting not with 1,000 and billions of downloads, right?
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you're reaching out to people that have the same values, that is, for my example, my case, for a yes, for the better of your community, they will say yes. They will love to be part of that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I was able to reach out to people that have the same values. I wasn't focused on downloads. And I've been able to reach the prima ballerina of Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
of Tania Ortega, the fashion stylist of Vogue.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was at the end of the day, value of the community. What is your job changing our community? How is it changing? So really like focus on how the values and why and reaching out to people because yeah, numbers are great for sponsorships, but that's not the only goal and that's not only the number one result of success.
Okay. And I just want you to know that was what people needed to hear. And I really appreciate you saying that. Okay. So we're gonna go over just really quickly. Tell people why they should come to your session at She Podcast.
Well, they should come to my session because I will be talking about the 5 steps to defining your podcast goals and rise to sustainable success. So, what we were talking about is just like a little taste of this,
A little bit.
a little bit. But it's more about going inner with your thoughts and just it's not just focusing on numbers and but doing that in a plan that will work for you
Okay.
and that will be healthy and not burn yourself out. We know there's a lot of conversation of burning out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to find and we're going to explain a process that can be effective, healthy, sustainable, so you can continue growing your show and change your life while you're producing your show. So it's possible, but it's just, it takes work.
Yes. Yeah. No. Okay. So that was, you guys heard it. So that's exactly why you need to go. And so I think a lot of us do get burnt out or just don't understand we're about to get burnt out. So coming to your session can definitely help alleviate or reduce that. And so everybody, first of all, Brenda, thank you so much for just taking your time to be able to just share this because I feel the nuggets that you've just given, right? I like to call them the little chocolates. So I feel the little chocolates dancing around. And so the little chocolates are out here having a great time because it's like, okay, I felt it. It wasn't just that I heard it, right? And so anybody, if you're watching on the replay, you can feel free to go ahead and always leave a comment and then join us at She Podcast in June and meet Brenda and all of the other great, wonderful, amazing speakers that will be at She Podcast. So again, thank you so much for being on today. And for everybody, make sure you always show up and show out and continue to give it to the people. Bye, guys.
Bye.